Welcome back, viewers and subscribers. Buckle up for this one. Today we're going to look at 80s martial arts action flick No Retreat, No Surrender, and why it's sort of like a good, bad movie and a bit of a mess. So, No Retreat, No Surrender is an 80s martial arts action flick. I personally never heard of it until I managed to find it on Amazon Prime here in the UK. The basic premise is a young sort of martial arts teenager is able to overcome great odds and bullies, both young teenage bullies and sort of a criminal organisation to avenge the honour of his of his loved ones. That's kind of the story in a nutshell. And how he does this is by supernatural means. Yep, you heard it correctly. So let's get into it. Yeah, so as mentioned, No Retreat, No Surrender is an 80s martial arts action flick. It seems to borrow heavily from classics like Karate Kid, but it seems to mix ideas. It's got Jean-Claude Van Damme as a Russian bad guy. It's probably a film that largely may have gone undiscovered by most people, and it is worth a look despite some real flaws in storytelling. So the film begins in a karate dojo in LA. And as a class is finishing, we get sort of the three members of a criminal organisation who come in and speak to the sensei, Tom Sitwell. They want to basically take over the dojo as a front for their criminal activities. Now, what would be interesting at this point is if we saw sort of more into the criminal organisation, or like what it was about, why it wanted to take over the dojo. But what instead we get is these kind of like one-dimensional style cartoon villains who sort of, like mustache twirling villains almost, who like want to take over the world type thing. That's all we get. Like, they just come to the dojo, they speak to the sensei Tom Sitwell, they sort of make offers of money to buy the dojo, and when he turns it down because he's sort of a good man at heart, he doesn't want to be involved in this kind of thing, the enforcers kind of challenge him to combat and beat him quite easily. And one of the students who witnesses Tom Sitwell, Sensei Tom Sitwell being beaten badly, is his own son, Jason Sitwell. I believe he's also called Kurt in the film at some points. But anyway, Jason Sitwell, who sort of tries to rush to his father's aid. The goons, in particular Jean-Claude Van Damme being one of them, just kind of like brush him off and leave. Now, the film could have been really interesting here, with a story of the bad guys kidnapping son Jason Stilwell and Master Sensei Tom Stilwell using karate to overcome them and get his son back. But nah, why bother? Instead, the film simply goes for wacky and weird storytelling. So the first fight scene between Sensei Tom Stilwell and the bad guys is actually quite decent. Of course, like I said, he's defeated by the bad guys. His son Jason Stilwell rushes to sort of his father's aid. He's also defeated by the bad guys, and then they leave, without really causing too much damage. And as the bad guys leave, we get sort of one of our first glimpses of sort of random emotions and sort of, emotions and outbursts from the characters, because like the bad guys have left and Jason the son is relatively unharmed, yet the father, Tom Stilwell, whose leg has been broken by one of the bad guys, starts screaming, Jason, stop fighting. Despite the fight actually having finished and his son being completely all right, it's just like a random outburst. And this is just the start of what's going to happen in the film. I mean, there's plenty more of that to come. Yeah, and as I mentioned, this seems to be like a theme in the film. People act, or maybe don't act, with like random or mistimed emotions that don't really land. And it just sort of feels a bit odd, but it kind of actually works. It's sort of a part of a charm of the film. It's really weird. Like, the film is dated, but it's still quite enjoyable, and it got a really good review as well from Rotten Tomatoes. So it's kind of odd. It's like I don't know whether it's a bad film that's good or a good film that's bad, but let's discover together. So, do father and son duo Tom and Jason Stilwell decide to stand up to these bullies like great 80s movies where the underdog beats the odds would have us believe? Nah, they just decide to sell the dojo and move to Seattle. Again, it's another missed opportunity for a good story arc. So basically at this point, the bad guys could literally take over the dojo and the film would be over, but course, that's not what's going to happen. So, like, you'd kind of think that, you know, this would be the main part of the story, right? That this criminal organisation would want to take over dojos. But no, it's just sort of like, it's the start of the film. You know, you're introduced to those characters. You think, oh, this is going to be like the main bit. No, it's just sort of sidelined for what happens next. Is, so as I said, the heroes give up, leave the dojo, move to Seattle. Once in Seattle, the Stillwells are sort of, you know, moving into their new home. Jason sets up a karate studio, like a dojo or studio, in his garage, in the home garage, and he overexcitedly kicks down some shelves, like setting it up. So this is the start of, like, you know, great sort of slapstick behaviour to come. And Jason's unpacking more of the family goods from the van, you know, the moving van. As he's doing that, a basketball falls out, sort of goes into the street, and it's picked up by R.J. Madison, who's like going to be like a sidekick character or a friend character to Jason. I think what they were trying to do is make R.J. Madison like a sort of funny, likeable sidekick character, but he sort of comes off as an innocent, socially awkward sidekick character, and he sort of starts telling Jason a few dad jokes in the street, which kind of don't really land too well. So while Jason and R.J. Madison are getting to know each other, we're introduced to Scott, who's eating an entire cake in the street, and says, "Just what the neighborhood needs, a Bruce Lee freak." You know, it seems Scott seems to have a problem with well-known martial artists, and again, it's completely random why that is. And he's enjoying random desserts in the street, in like a random location, you know, the street, while he reflects on like someone who likes martial arts moving in. Perhaps Scott lived in a neighborhood of martial artists that banned cake previously, but we'll never know because it all just seems random. Now, I thought that Scott was going to be introduced as a kind of friend to both R.J. Madison and Jason Stillwell in a kind of like Goonies, Stranger Things type vibe, which would have, like, you know, worked out nicely for the film, and particularly with a resurgence of these things now. But obviously this is a film in the 80s, but particularly with a resurgence of these things now, like Cobra Kai on Netflix, you know, you could see them all learn karate and kind of go up against the criminal organization. But nah, that's not, you know, that's too interesting. Let's just do something weird instead. Scott is actually meant to be a bully, but again, the film doesn't really outline the reasons for this, and he's actually meant to have a problem with the character R.J. Madison, but it's cut from the film. So again, it's just like random why he doesn't like the two heroes. So R.J. Madison is taking an interest in Jason's martial art equipment until Jason accidentally throws a boxing or training ball into R.J. Madison's face for comedy value. So R.J. Madison just randomly decides this is a good time to breakdance, and while doing that, he climbs the same shelves that Jason kicked earlier and falls off and injures himself. And it's kind of clear that, you know, R.J. Madison and Jason are going to be good friends because they both seem like teenagers who can't be let out of the house without adult supervision. So Jason continues to practice being really terrible at martial arts at night. And the next day, the two have agreed to go to the grave of Bruce Lee in Seattle because, you know, Jason's expressed an interest to it in R.J. Madison, and R.J. Madison just happens to know where the grave of Bruce Lee is. You know, this is a time before the internet and all that kind of thing, but he still just happens to know where it specifically is in a graveyard, so they go to visit it. So we then cut to Scott sort of sitting in his front lawn with a jet spray that, you know, you use for washing windows, but instead of doing that, he's lined up some cans and he's basically shooting them over with the water and doing really poor Clint Eastwood impressions while he does that. So at least for Scott, probably R.J. Madison as well, and Jason, it's pretty clear that someone needs to invent the internet pretty quickly for free time just to keep these three rogues out of trouble. We then see like Scott's father figure come out of the house, and he's sort of complaining to Scott about doing his lack of chores and all that kind of thing. But it's so kind of poorly written, it just seems like some relative like having a bit of a fit over a child just messing around a little bit. So it's kind of, yeah, a bit random again. And then what we see is Scott sort of like harassing and attacking R.J. Madison, who's coming by on a skateboard. But again, because their rivalry's been cut from the film, it sort of makes Scott look like he's got some kind of, you know, real problem with doing chores, or like, you know, he can't keep his attention on things for a very long period of time, or, you know, just make up whatever you think, really, I guess. And R.J. Madison's able to escape this attack by Scott on his skateboard, and then sort of goes past what looks like a kind of useless construction site. These construction workers have put up barricades for the public, but no actual construction work's being done. And Scott chases R.J. Madison onto this construction site. RJ Madison starts tempting and challenging Scott to jump over the useless barricades, and the construction workers basically throw health and safety out the window. I suppose it wasn't really a thing in the 80s that much. And by looks of things, they encourage Scott to jump over the barricades, even though they could be sued if he gets injured. Scott makes it, but RJ Madison kicks the skateboard, which Scott then trips on, and it's all a hilarious combo of damaged property and potential injury to a human being. And I know I'd mentioned this earlier, but yeah, RJ Madison arrives to meet Jason. Jason asks where he's been. He basically lies and says he's been to see some girl, rather than explain that he was running away from Scott. Don't know why. And the two go to the grave of Bruce Lee, as I mentioned earlier. And then, yeah, so, I mean, it gets even weirder. Basically, Jason has a fight with his father at one stage in the film. This leads to Jason and RJ Madison setting up a dojo, a karate dojo in an abandoned house that RJ Madison seems to know about. And the ghost of Bruce Lee comes to train Jason in martial arts. I mean, yeah, that is really the story. Like, I mean, this is the crazy thing. Like, they've chosen to go for this kind of weird Animal House goofing around teenage thing as the main part of the story, rather than like the criminal organization that is threatening the dojos. I mean, there's a good story in there. It's just trying to come out, but it is actually an entertaining film. So, like, Jason and RJ Madison are watching TV. They see this kind of Seattle karate champion on TV. They decide to go to his dojo well, Jason decides to try and, learn further karate. So they go there. Despite the ghost of Bruce Lee teaching him, karate, he decides to go there to learn karate as well. Because again, why not? Why not get all the karate in the world? Because it will help with what you're planning to do. So he goes there anyway. And it just so happens Scott is a student at the karate dojo. And while Jason's getting ready, Scott kind of takes the sensei to one side, and says, "Oh, that guy beat me up. He did this, that." And he's obviously, Scott's covered in bruises. "He did this, that, and the other to me." And the sensei asks about it. And Scott says, "Well, he was going on about how good LA karate is and how bad Seattle karate is." So, of course, the sensei, who's a professional, karate instructor, takes Scott at his word and gets all the sort of champions to beat the living daylights out of Jason on his first day at the dojo. So this is all kind of to set up the idea of Seattle karate being like, a rival. There's kind of two storylines here, like the teenage storyline and the criminal organization storyline that's, barely touched on. But yeah, so obviously the criminals come to this Seattle dojo and they speak to the Seattle champion and they want to get that dojo. And what this is meant to, what we're leading to basically is the ghost of Bruce Lee is going to train Jason so well that he's able to save the Seattle dojo, and they're all going to become the best of friends, against like the criminal organization. And you throw into this, obviously before any of that happens, you throw into this love triangle story for Jason. So there's a girl named Kelly who he knows from LA, and also is like the assistant Seattle karate instructor's got an interest in Kelly, and he sort of says, "Kelly will be putty in my arms," which makes Scott and all the others laugh, because no one's ever used that expression ever. It's always putty in my hands. But yeah, there's kind of a rivalry then meant to be shown between the Seattle instructor Dean and Jason, which is obviously going to be resolved when Jason, who's trained by the spirit of Bruce Lee, can save the day and save all their honor. So as mentioned, Karate Kid was probably a heavy influence on No Retreat, No Surrender, but it makes the Karate Kid look like a godfather of martial arts films by comparison. And it feels like you're watching what would happen if the Goonies were taught karate by Mr. Miyagi. It's wacky, ridiculous, totally 80s, but you know what? It's enjoyable because of all those reasons. The film doesn't take itself too seriously, and it simply goes with the fact that storytelling is all over the place, but it's entertaining for those reasons. So No Retreat, No Surrender gets 3 stars out of 5 from TAKTAK Toys With Film. And now let's talk action figures. So Jason Stillwell and Jean-Claude Van Damme as Ivan Krushki, RJ Madison and the ghost of Bruce Lee would all make great action figures. Scott would probably be needed, although the teenage bully storyline is sort of pointless, and Seattle karate instructor Dean as well. NECA could tackle these characters in action figure form, and good luck to them if they attempt it. So that's my take on No Retreat, No Surrender. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment and subscribe. It all helps the channel. And until next time, enjoy those flicks and figs.